If you're watching this video, you're probably the kind of person who has a lot of ideas and enjoys expressing themselves, or at least wants to. But then when you attempt to, something happens. Pick up your pencil and start drawing lines, or you pick up your instrument and start playing. You start creating something, but then suddenly you feel a sinking feeling in your stomach. It's not good enough, you say to yourself. If you're a creative or someone who at least wants to be more creative, you've probably felt that feeling at least once. And for many, it's a reoccurring roadblock that prevents us from doing, and more importantly, enjoying the things that we do. I know for myself, it's kept me stuck for many, many, many years until I finally cracked the code. I slayed the boss that I call perfectionism. And so today I want to share the ideas that help me get over my perfectionism and hopefully can help you as well. Hello, my name is Rain, and welcome to Good Luck, Have Fun, a series where I combine spirituality and manifestation concepts to help people get out of their own way and have more fun creating awesome shit. If that's not your cup of tea, that's perfectly okay. But for the rest who want to hear my secret tips, just take what resonates and leave the rest. Now, let's get into it. So the first point that I want to share is that perfectionism is usually tied to issues of self-worth and identity. And there's two main reasons why I can think of that a person may be or may become perfectionistic. There could be more, but these are just two that I know definitely really apply to myself in my life. The first reason is you want to be perfect so that you can feel valued and recognized. Now, this can happen for a plethora of reasons, many of which that tie back to childhood trauma. And I won't get too deep into it because there's just so many ways that can happen. But the basis is that at some point earlier in your life, you went through experiences and events that made you feel as if you weren't valued or worthy, and especially when it comes to getting the things that you want. And so somewhere along the way, you may have made the association and the assumption that if you can do something, worthy of attention and praise, then you'll feel valued and then you'll feel whole. But it's an incorrect assumption to assume that you'll feel valued when other people or things outside of yourself make you feel valued and worthy. After all, it was other people and events outside of yourself that made you feel unworthy in the first place. You weren't born as a baby thinking you were unworthy of getting what you wanted and needed. When you were hungry, you cried and screamed for food. You didn't just sit there and wonder, do I deserve food right now? And so with that realization, you'll come to realize that a sense of worthiness and self-esteem is never going to come from outside of you. It can only ever come from within. When you task other people and other things with the impossible task of making you feel worthy, you just make a slippery slope for yourself. Sure, your friends and family may make you feel good, but certainly not all the time. And a random stranger on the street has no obligation to be kind to you either. Would it be nice if they did? And do I prefer to live in a world where everybody is nice? Of course, absolutely. But even so, no one's obligated to that. And that's simply just not the world we live in right now. But man, I can hear you thinking to yourself now, Rain, well, Rain, how can I have a strong sense of self-esteem and always feel worthy then? Well, I'm glad you asked. Here's the secret, right? You are inherently worthy. You are and always will be worthy simply because you exist. And so is everyone else. Absolutely no one and no thing can ever, ever, ever take that away from you. You are a divine spark, a piece of the universe manifested into physical form. Thousands of ancestors across thousands, if not tens of thousands of years had to exist, and all the right circumstances and all the right events had to take place at just the right time, across millennia, honestly, just for you to be living and breathing where you are right now. No one in this world can offer the unique perspective and creations that you yourself can offer to this world. And no one and nothing can ever replace you when you're gone. Nothing. The universe simply would not be the same without you. The source, or God, or whatever you would like to call it, is often described as the culmination of all that exists, all that is. And so, by definition, the source could not be the source if you didn't exist, if you weren't here. You don't need to prove yourself. You don't have anything that you need to prove to anybody. Even if you spent the rest of your life doing nothing, you'd be doing far more for the world than you can ever realize. You don't need to compete with anyone else. In fact, you can't really ever compete with other people. You can only ever compete with yourself, and that should always be fun. You don't need anyone or anything outside of yourself to prove to you that you're worthy. You don't have to do anything to be worthy. You are simply worthy just because you exist, and nothing will ever change that. Now, the second reason I can think of why someone would become very perfectionistic is because, on some level, they want bad things, or quote unquote bad things, to never happen. Now, in a sense, this both is and isn't possible because it's all a matter of perspective. If you're hoping to have a life where you're never experiencing challenges, well, that's not really possible because challenges and contrasts are ingrained into life. Contrast is the idea that there are always things that we can either judge as good or bad, or in terms that I like more, preferable and unpreferable. It's like yin and yang, life isn't black and white, it's many shades of gray in between. There's good in the bad and bad in the good. If we never experienced anything unpreferable in this world or in life in general, then nothing new would ever need to be created and life would become boring and redundant and unnecessary, honestly. We wouldn't really have a reason to exist in the way that we do. To make a small example, we could use the invention of chairs. It's uncomfortable to be standing all the time, and so to deal with that unpreferable experience, someone invented the idea of a chair. A nice, cozy seat for you to sit on and rest, or even gather around a table, another invention, and eat a nice meal with your friends and family. And you can honestly apply that ideology to anything that's ever really been created in our world, or even achieved in our world. Someone experienced an unpreferable thing, an unpreferable challenge, and they created something or overcame their previous capabilities in order to surpass the challenge or solve the challenge or overcome it. And the thing is, challenges aren't inherently bad or unpleasurable to overcome. They can be fun, like playing video games. And now, obviously, we certainly have many, many, many big challenges in our world that certainly make us feel as though challenges are a bad thing. The big things like war, hunger, limited resources, those old things. But the thing is that if there's a problem, then that means that a solution exists. That's simply the law. They're two sides of the same coin. Overcoming challenges doesn't have to be an impossible and miserable task. The thing about perfectionism, though, is that they make challenges way, 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 way harder than they need to be. When you're in a constant state of worry or stress, you're taking yourself out of the flow state, which is the best state you want to be in if you want to have a fun and pleasurable and creative experience of life. We're going to talk a lot more about the flow state over the course of this video, so don't worry. But to sum it up briefly, for those who may not know, I'm sure a lot of you already know, but the flow state is that state of being where ideas, naturally and effortlessly come to you, where you're like in the zone when you're doing a sport or a physical activity, or when you're doing something you really love or enjoy and you lose track of time and hours seem to go by in what feels like minutes. Flow state is something that everybody gets into, whether they're aware of it or not. And I believe it's commonly associated with the delta or gamma wave state of the brain, but I don't know which of the two it is or if it's a different one entirely, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, when you're constantly worried or stressed about something, you're not focusing on it properly and therefore not engaging with it in the most optimal way. Because when creating becomes a live or die scenario where not making something good enough means not having something to eat or not having a home, well, of course it's going to be a lot of pressure. Of course you're going to be stressed out about whether or not your work is good enough. It sounds counterintuitive, but worrying and stressing will actually align you a lot more with the scenarios in your head that you don't want to happen, and not worrying will actually make you a lot more productive. Because obviously if you're worrying and not putting stuff out, then that's obviously things that could have been made that's not getting out into the world and, being seen and making you money and things like that. But the thing is, usually our fears are, unfounded and they don't even come to pass anyway. So instead we're just left with this, miserable cycle of stress and frustration and burnout when, we could just be creating stuff and having fun, and best of all, even, making money off of it without being too stressed about the outcome. And later in the video, I'll be revealing the secret to get into the flow state and stay in the flow state. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. But, here's the thing, right? No matter how much you want to listen to your mind, it's not a fortune teller. it can't predict the future with 100% accuracy. And therefore, your mind will never be a reliable source of guidance. Life is unpredictable, but honestly, if it were, then it'd be pretty fucking boring, not gonna lie. There's many scenarios in life in which you can't guarantee that taking a certain action will always lead to a certain result without fail, right? Going to college doesn't guarantee you a job immediately after graduating, or going on a first date doesn't immediately or always guarantee that you're going to marry that person and spend the rest of your life with them, right? And oftentimes we know in hindsight that that's a good thing. Maybe, that job that you applied to was a terrible place to work, or that person you went on a first date with was a terrible person. You can't always assume that, the way that things unfold, even if it's unpreferable at first, you can't assume that it's a bad thing, that it's happening for a bad reason, right? The vast majority of things in life, your mind will never be able to predict. So why would you listen to it when it tells you negative things, right? When it tells you that you suck and you'll never be successful, well, it doesn't fucking know that. You could never rely on it in that way. It simply doesn't know that. And now I know. You may be wondering, well, what should I listen to, huh? How should I guide myself, right? Well, I'm glad you asked. I have the perfect answer that you're probably not going to want to hear. But the answer is your heart. Now, hear me out before you click off. Hear me out. Your heart is a far, far more reliable guide, not because it can predict the future with 100% accuracy either, but because it's tied to your unique source of power, right? Your strength that makes you stand out from everybody else in the world. What is that? Your intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is described as doing an activity for the inherent enjoyment, satisfaction, or challenge it provides, instead of for any external reward like money, praise, or avoiding an unpreferable outcome or unwanted experience. When you're intrinsically motivated, you always have the highest probability of overcoming whatever challenge comes your way, simply because it'll be fun and engaging for you to do so, or you'll be doing it in a way that's the least amount of resistance, right? It's like playing a game, right? If you enjoy the game, then you're more likely to get through all the levels and beat all the bosses and eventually beat the game. But if you hate the game, then you're going to hate everything about it and all the bosses and all the challenges, and you're going to give up on it. And honestly, for a good reason. Why would you want to play a game that you hate? But yet, funnily enough, that's what we do with our lives, right? We do things that we hate or don't prefer because we think that it'll get us things that we want or keep us away from things that we don't want. But if we hate what we do, then it'll never give us what we want in the way that we want it. If you hate a game, you're not going to care about the rewards that you get for beating it. And in a similar manner, if you hate your job, even if you make millions of dollars at that job, it won't take away the stress that that job brings you. Eventually, it'll become so much for the literal sake of your health and well-being that you'll have to drop it anyway. And oftentimes, that thing that you hate that you're keeping in your life will get in the way of what you actually need to be happy and fulfilled. There's a very common saying you may have heard, and it goes, trust the process, right? As both creatives and as human beings navigating this interesting world, it's imperative, honestly, to have a level of trust in life itself and in yourself. If you live your life doing the things that you truly enjoy and are passionate about, and have a level of trust that you'll find a way through the challenges and things will work out somehow, you'll become unstoppable. You'll get through challenges easily because you enjoy the doing, not the outcome. The outcome is good too, but it's just simply not the point, right? You're content with the doing of the thing in the way that your life is currently, and you're not looking for that thing, whatever outcome you're hoping for, to be your savior and to change your life, You're content in the present moment. Someone who's more passionate than you at something is far more likely to outperform you in the long term. Again, even if you're good at something you hate, eventually it'll become so much to the point that you'll have to give it up for the sake of your health and well-being. Whereas the other person who's passionate about it and intrinsically motivated to do it will get through it with relative ease because they enjoy it. Understand that everything, and I mean everything, is always working in our favor and our highest good. But we are the ones who have the tendency to get in the way of those good outcomes from happening. Through our negative beliefs, fears, and worry, we lead ourselves down paths that we honestly were never meant to walk in the first place. We stop ourselves from seeing the solutions that are often right in front of us or are screaming within our hearts, begging to be heard. But the other thing is that when you're faced with a challenge, if you choose and decide for yourself that this challenge is there for a good reason, for your benefit, and choose to learn from whatever the challenge is trying to show you and teach you, you'll always get a net positive from the experience. And in the end, it'll always turn into a positive experience. In essence, your challenges are there to get you where you want to go. They're not actually impediments on your path, just detours. You are the captain of your life. You are always the one with the final say in how you approach and experience life. The more you approach life with a sort of grounded optimism, doing what you love, the easier it'll get. Not because the challenges somehow stop appearing, but because you become adept at facing them and overcoming them. Now, here, we're going to get into some interesting metaphysics, so bear with me, okay? Now, I want you to consider something. You don't have to take it at face value just because I'm saying it, but simply consider it as a concept. Consider that perhaps the brain doesn't create anything, but instead, the brain, the mind, is simply a receiver, like a radio that picks up on signals and transmits them and translates them into a form that you can see and perceive and understand. You may have heard stories of musicians who said their greatest hits were written in a matter of minutes and it all just seemed to flow to them, or inventors who suddenly had a spark and idea for an invention that just sort of flooded to them and they rushed to write everything down before they forgot. Many creative people will often tell you that sometimes they have a sense that they're not actually creating anything, but more so channeling something through them. Now, this is an idea that can be immensely helpful to perfectionists, but you might not like hearing it at first. You might be thinking to yourself, well, what do you mean I'm not creating anything? What am I doing it for then? And if you're thinking that, then again, you're still attaching your sense of self-worth and identity to the things that you output into the world. But the paradox is that when you attach less of your identity and self-worth to the things that you make, you actually become a much more open and clear vessel for things to become channeled through you. Think of ideas and inspiration like a river that's constantly flowing. When you're insistent about what's worthy of being expressed or to what quality it has to be expressed, it's like putting a dam in the river. You're blocking it from coming through you. And if you want to practice letting this river flow through you boundlessly and with ease, creating things left and right, then we need to explore this idea a little further. In many philosophical and spiritual ideas, there's the concept of the spirit world or the immaterial realm, right? Anything that exists or has the potential to exist must first exist in the template level of reality, a immaterial world or the spirit realm, essentially as a concept or a template. To use the chair example again, the idea, the concept, the template of a chair, of chairness, already existed before the inventor invented it. You know, could be a seat with 4 legs or 3 legs, or just a seat with, a base, a back attached to it. But the concept of a chair already existed. And if it didn't, then the inventor wouldn't have even been able to conceive of it. And just because they were the first to bring it into the world doesn't mean that they were the only one capable of doing so. For the sake of this example, I'm going to show a little drawing, and excuse my shitty MS Paint skills, but we're going to split ourselves into 3 parts, okay? People often think of themselves as human beings who have a soul, but a more accurate way of, looking at it and describing it would be that you are a soul who's choosing to have a human experience. Your body is a manifestation of your soul and therefore technically contained within it. And the same applies to everyone else. Everyone else is also a soul, a divine spark, having a human experience manifested into a human body. Now, the third layer has many names, but this example, I'll simply call it the source. Our souls themselves are also manifestations of the one source itself, and therefore are also contained within it. And therefore, everyone has access to the source because everyone is a part of it and contained within it. And everything is the source, hence the name. And so the reason why one person can have an idea and do nothing with it, only to find out later on that someone else had the same idea and actually did something with it and put it out into the world, is because we all have access to the source. And therefore, we all have access to limitless numbers of ideas that can come to us and come through us. Now, as people, we all have unique personalities, preferences, and dispositions, which make us a match to certain ideas and express certain ideas differently. Certain things are therefore attracted to certain people. So when you come up with an idea in your ego and hubris, thinking that, oh, I'm the only one who could have come up with this idea, I'm so good, I'm so special, well, that's not exactly true. The idea came to you because it's something that resonates with you, but that doesn't mean that it can't resonate with someone else as well. After all, there isn't only one Star Wars fan in the world or one Linkin Park fan in the world. Certain ideas resonate with larger groups of people, while others seemingly with less. But nonetheless, whether you're the one bringing the idea into form or the one experiencing the fruit of someone else's creation, everyone has access to that idea because everyone is a part of the source and therefore connected to it. When you're truly, truly enjoying what you're doing, the outcome doesn't matter anyway. It doesn't matter whether someone else could have come up with the idea or not, because you simply love and enjoy the process. If you find yourself being overly focused on the outcome, there could be many reasons, but I can think of three main big ones. The first is that you don't actually enjoy that thing and just want the reward or whatever you think it's going to get you. Two, you're not doing the thing you enjoy in the most fun and enjoyable way. Or three, you don't trust the process and trust that your life is unfolding in the way that it needs to get you where you need to go. The more you can get yourself to simply do things and create simply because it's fun to do so, not only will creating become easier, but you'll become far, far more productive and more likely to achieve the things that you were hoping and intending to achieve in the first place. When you're in the flow state, that's when you're most connected to the source and most likely to have ideas flow through you or perform at your highest. Now, I mentioned earlier that I would tell you the secret to getting into the flow state, but it's honestly not really a secret because I've been saying it over the course of the whole video. The secret is fun, it's passion, it's excitement. When you're in a state of fun, passion, enjoyment, pleasure, engagement, that's precisely when you're in the flow state. When you're connected to the things you're intrinsically motivated to do, you're most likely to enter that flow state. Being in flow is like letting the river of ideas and inspiration flow through you naturally and easily, hence the word flow. You're in a state of channeling. You aren't creating the ideas because they already exist on another level, but instead you're channeling them through you and bringing them into the world of form, bringing them into our physical world in your own unique way. And that's a huge, huge amount of pressure off your back. When you're being perfectionistic, you're like a dam trying to hold the whole weight and pressure of the river against you. But when you're in flow, you're just allowing it to go through you. You're going with the flow, not against it. If you're not the one creating the ideas, then they're not a reflection of you or your own self-worth. And they never were, nor could they ever be. And trust me, I know what you're thinking. Well, even if the ideas aren't technically mine, I'm still the one who has to write or paint or make the music, right? And yes, you're absolutely right. There very well may still be a level of quality that you're hoping to achieve. But the truth is that getting to that level of quality doesn't come from being perfectionistic. Quality comes from quantity. It comes from repetition and iteration, making mistakes and learning from them. The more you create and put your best foot forth to improve little by little with each iteration, each creation, it's inevitable that you'll get better and more confident too. You don't have to be careless or, put out a crazy amount of work that you don't like, but as long as you go at the pace that you prefer and enjoy and try to learn with each iteration, that's what matters the most. If you're stressing over being perfect, then you're only hurting yourself in the long run. The more you understand that the mind is simply a receiver and an observer, the more you can observe the work, the creativity as it flows through you, as it unfolds through you. One of the things that actually changed my life and my perspective was something very simple, which was watercolor painting. For anyone who's ever used watercolors, you know that you don't have full control over how things turn out because the water moves, the colors can shift, the paint sort of has a mind of its own, and it creates patterns and textures that you weren't expecting or sometimes didn't even want. But it's that lack of control that really taught me a lot. I learned to simply just enjoy laying the strokes down on the paper and seeing where the water goes and what it creates. The creative process was no longer fully in my control. I was just an observer of it, a conduit in which it could come into this world, right? Creation was happening through me. If that sounds interesting to you, I definitely recommend picking up watercolor painting as an exercise without any particular goals, just painting and observing, seeing what happens. Of course, you could do that with other mediums like playing music, playing with sounds, and just observing and appreciating the way that it sounds, or even just sitting in a park, watching the trees sway or the maybe a body of water in front of you or people passing you by. Again, all these things are really just forms of meditation, but I'm not going to tell you to go meditate because I know most of you probably don't want to hear that. But if you did, that would also be very, very helpful too. But nonetheless, the principle is the same. The more you can learn to engage with things without needing them to be any particular way, without needing them to be your savior or change your life, and simply just let them unfold however they may, then the more you can tap into true power and true creativity. Because if you want to be boundlessly creative, then you can't put any bounds on your creativity. Get it? Now, there's one last piece I have to talk about. A lot of people tend to have the misconception that only once your work is to a certain standard, only then will you be successful. I mean, after all, that's what our school system teaches us, that we must never fail and always be perfect. And once we reach a certain level, maybe, just maybe, we'll have a shot at supporting ourselves and making money, But that's just counterproductive to how actual learning and actual growth takes place. Improvement and mastery comes from making mistakes, from learning from those mistakes and iterating. But especially in today's age, the age of the internet and information and social media, you can see, countless examples of people on the internet who are very successful despite maybe not having work that is to your liking or to your standard of quality. I mean, hell, if you want to be a rapper today, you don't even need to be literate. You just got to have aura and good beats. So I say all that to say that you don't need to be perfect to be successful. So striving for perfection is pointless anyway. If every person is inherently worthy, that must also mean that everything that they create, everything that comes from them, is also inherently worthy. Instead of judging things as good or bad, it could be beneficial to look at them instead as just simply different from each other. That's not to say that you can't have preferences, but one artist who draws in a super photorealistic style isn't inherently better than an artist who draws in a cartoon style. They're just different. Some people prefer the former, while others far more prefer the latter. And in a similar way, a child's painting isn't inherently worse or better than a master artist's painting. Both are full of passion, though the child's mother might far more prefer the child's painting over the master painter's painting. And so the next thing you need to understand is that value is entirely subjective. Nothing in life has inherent meaning. Everything is essentially neutral. It's impossible to put an objective numerical dollar value on anything in this world or in life in general. But we humans, we as people, have learned to assign value to things based on certain factors like utility or demand or other things like that. But in the eyes of the universe, in the grand scheme of things, everything is equal. Therefore, everything is neutral. Value is entirely subjective. An example I always tell my friends is if you take a child prodigy who's very, very incredibly gifted at sports and put them in a family who values education over everything, those parents aren't going to recognize that child's inherent gifts and incredible potential and passion. They're going to tell the child that playing sports is a dream and that they need to focus on more important and realistic things. They're going to crush the child's self-esteem and take them away from their power, honestly. They're intrinsic motivation. And that child will likely be stunted on their growth in life and on their path in life and have to learn how to recover and heal from that trauma. However, if that same child were born to parents who were both athletes and both really valued sports and athleticism, those parents would immediately recognize that child's gifts and potential. They'd celebrate it and they'd be genuinely proud of it. They'd help that child to pursue their passion. And the thing is, whether or not the child goes on to play professionally when they grow up, they would have had a far different experience of life. They would have a healthy sense of self-esteem and learn that their passion and their intrinsic motivations have value, and that if they follow them, they can overcome challenges. And thus that child would have been supported in learning how to succeed from a very young age. When you understand that value is entirely subjective, you'll then have a very important revelation. Everything you do is valuable. Nothing in this world is without value. Even even the poop that comes out of our body has values because it goes back into the ground and nourishes the ecosystem and helps breed new life into the world. There's nothing in this world that doesn't have value. It's simply a matter of perspective of who is judging the value of something. As they say, after all, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And honestly, this epiphany is one of the reasons why I myself started this channel and started posting more. Even the thoughts and opinions that you don't think about and care about that pass you by like the wind are worth so much. They're incredibly valuable. A YouTuber with 1 million subscribers' opinion isn't inherently more valuable than yours. Now, of course, like I said, our society tends to assign value based on more practical things, more tangible things like utility and demand and other things like that. And so that YouTuber may have built an audience by learning a lot about a particular subject and providing a unique and balanced perspective. Essentially, they built up the perceived value of their opinion by making it informed and useful. But again, the key word is perceived value. Their opinion isn't technically more valuable than yours in the grand scheme of things in the eyes of the universe, but they simply found a way to convince others that it is. And that certainly can be for good reason. I'm not saying that there isn't, value in that, tangible value in that. But however, it's for that same principle why scammers exist. Scammers also increase the perceived value of whatever they're offering by being deceptive and lying. If a scammer can make people believe that something is more valuable than what it actually is, then they can make a lot of money a lot faster without putting in a socially acceptable amount of effort into it. Now, obviously, I'm not telling you guys to go out scamming people. That's not cool. Don't do that. But I'm simply making a point. I say all this to simply motivate you to just start. You simply never can truly know who might value what you have to offer. And if you really want to provide, practical, tangible value to people, that can always be learned. But you have to just start. When you understand that you have the same potential and opportunity as any other successful person, why wouldn't you just start the thing that you want to do or enjoy doing? If your art is just as inherently valuable as Picasso's art, why wouldn't you start? Why wouldn't you keep doing it? You are the one who decides the value of anything in your life. When you decide to see everything that comes from you as valuable, then you'll naturally find more ways to create and to be creative. A master isn't a master because their work is inherently more valuable than others, but simply because they've put in the effort to raise the perceived value of their work. But again, this doesn't have to be done only by level of skill or detail. Some artists and creative people are famous simply because of their stories, because of the passion that they put into their work, into their craft, and the sort of unbreakable amount of belief they have in themselves. I'm sure you can think of certain people like that. Life is a mirror. The things you believe are ultimately what you will end up experiencing out of life. So choose to think positively and have positive beliefs. Because if everything is neutral and has no built-in meaning, then why wouldn't you choose to have a positive and fun experience of life, right? If you are excited about something or passionate about something, then that means that there are other people out there who would be happy to receive what you have to give. We don't exist in a vacuum. We're all connected to each other. We're all connected to that one source. And so if something resonates with you, it has to also resonate with other people. If you put yourself out there, the right people will find you. And if you're not someone's cup of tea, that's perfectly okay. Just focus on the ones who are. a lot of what I've been saying in this video simply boils down to the fact that if you're a perfectionist, you make way too big of a deal out of creating. You're putting it on this huge imaginary pedestal, making it out to be this bigger deal than it really is. Well, of course, if you put something on a pedestal, it's going to be much harder for you to reach. Creating is something that everybody, and I mean everybody, does naturally, whether you recognize it or not. Everyone is a creator, whether it be of art, music, film, dance, code, inventions, stories, theories, food, ideas, conversations, opinions, experiences, memories, and the list goes on and on, from the most revered things in society to even the most mundane things that we don't really seem to give much weight to. Our entire lives is an act of creation from start to finish. Everyone's life is a work of art. Creativity belongs to everyone, not to the few who seem to think they're better than everyone else simply for the things that they do in the world and in society. When you stop making creativity an impossible aspiration and instead treat it as something as easy and as trivial as walking or breathing, something you just casually do without thinking too deeply about it, you no longer put it on a pedestal, and you then allow yourself to create endlessly, knowing that everything that comes from you has worth and has value, even if it isn't yet like the vision you have in your head. Creating can be as easy and fun as playing a casual game at the end of a long day. The joy of creating is in the act and in the unfolding between where you are and your goal, but not the goal itself. If you want to be an incredible creator, then really all you have to do is remember and realize that you already are and always have been. So stop making such a big fucking deal out of it. If you made it to the end of the video, I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope there was some useful or insightful nuggets of ideas in there for you. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to chat with you guys, and if you did enjoy, feel free to like and subscribe, please. Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Luck, Have Fun, and I hope to chat with you guys very soon. Peace.